Hi, this video is going to feature some guidelines, some advice on how to identify problem players and problem game masters before actually playing with them. This video is going to be a follow-up to another video that I made a few days ago where I talk about how to identify 5 types of players and game masters that you may wish to avoid. That is when you are actually playing with them and you try to control the damage that is caused because of that interaction. Maybe the campaign or the adventure can be rescued in a way if you kick out the player or if you come to a certain agreement or identify the problem with the player. And in other cases, you need to avoid or stop playing in the game that is being handled or run by the game master. So this video specifically is going to focus on identifying those problem game masters and players before you actually start playing with them. Because sometimes, even though you have a session 0, the social contract, they do manage to find a way into your game. Or perhaps you start to play with a game master and you realize too late that it was a big mistake. Perhaps it has been about 18 years, more or less, since I've had some sort of problem with players or game masters. So I hope my experience and some tips and advice could help you avoid those situations. I'm going to approach this topic from a superficial angle at first, and then we are going to go deeper. This video was inspired by one of my viewers, Jedak, because he mentioned that it would be a good thing to identify those players and game masters before actually playing with them. Okay. First, when it comes to the place where you are going to find those players or game masters, and these are just my personal tips and recommendations. You may choose to follow them or not. Maybe you think, oh, those tips don't make too much sense. It's based on my personal experience and also some things that other people have shared with me. I would actually avoid gaming conventions and hobby stores in order to find players. When it comes to game masters, that may be the only way. But it's not impossible to find a game master in other places, and I will tell you why in a few moments. But when it comes to players, it's much better to find them in other places. And why is that? Well, this is taking into account or into consideration the current political climate. When it comes to hobby stores and conventions, because of the very nature of keeping the convention or the store alive, they are going to be pushing the most popular role-playing games. So if you are looking for other sorts of role-playing games, more niche or cult classics, most of the hobby stores, conventions, for example, in this current time, in this current moment, Dungeons and Dragons is 5th edition, is the most popular RPG. If you don't like Dungeons and Dragons 5th edition, it's going to be very difficult to find a player or a game master that plays something else. It's not impossible, but it's very difficult. And you could be thinking, but what if I like Dungeons and Dragons 5th edition? I would still advise against it because, well, throughout history, quality and quantity, they usually do not match. So most players in a convention, most players in a game store, they are going to be following certain tendencies, certain schools of thought when it comes to role-playing games. And for example, those that keep asking questions all the time, I'm going to put a link in the description to my video where I talk about how you can avoid asking questions, rather finding those answers or information through roleplay. If you are someone that just plays role-playing game and doesn't mind breaking the immersion all the time, if you're playing the role-playing game more like a board game than an RPG that is with elements of roleplay and gaming, then you won't find that to be too bothersome. But for those of us that are looking for actual roleplay, yes, conventions, hobby stores, it's very somewhat difficult to find people there. So, what would I say when it comes to finding people elsewhere? Although a lot of people have advised against this, I don't know why. I even saw this in some RPG books throughout the years. They say don't play with friends and family. I find that advice quite flawed. Perhaps it's because the current family situation in the world, because of social engineering, etc. Like I said, the current political climate, and perhaps because there are some very superficial bonds when it comes to friendship. They are not very deep, and a lot of people, those issues, those underlying issues, they come to the surface when they sometimes play role-playing games, perhaps even board games and such. But in the case of a healthy family, a good friendship, you definitely want to check out if those members of the family or friends are interested in playing role-playing games. It's very easy to describe role-playing games for someone who has never played them before. You could just tell them like, oh, it's kind of like a board game, but at the same time there is improvisational acting. And if you have played video games, it's kind of like an RPG in a video game format, but you can do so many other things. When it comes to spells, powers, abilities, you can do anything that you like, or rather attempt it at least, and there will be beneficial or negative consequences to your actions. And you can kind of like get them enthusiastic about playing if you give a proper description of what the hobby is. So, when it comes to friends and family, I think some good tips to see if that is viable is to see how you get along with those friends and family in other situations. For example, maybe you get along with your brother or your cousin, and that person, your brother or your cousin or whoever, he or she, they do not mind that you sometimes give orders or commands in certain situations. Perhaps you have played board games with them and they do not mind if you are just like someone with a certain authority within the game. Or maybe in other situations, any sort of situations, they are okay. There aren't conflicts where when you give some indications or things like that, then you know that they are perfect candidates for player characters, and they accept the role of the referee or the game master as someone who is coordinating things, running things entirely. Well, when it comes to the game world, so that's a good way to identify friends and family that they are willing to let you have a certain authority over the rules. But there could be some other cases. Maybe you get along with your uncle or yes, any other member of the family, or a friend that perhaps is older than you, but they do not like taking indications or there's directions from you. I think if you still get along with them and you like the same sorts of themes and stories, maybe you all like science fiction, fantasy, you could still try to get them to run the game as a game master. If they don't mind learning rules and such, you can tell them, oh, there is this really cool game. I would love to play it with you and some other people, depending on the size of the group. And you could be saying like, but there is a position of someone that needs to coordinate things. I know that maybe you would like that position or role within the game. So if you can learn this set of rules, you could start out very simple. For example, the quick and classic role-playing game. My review for that RPG will be in the description. Probably the most simple RPG system that still feels satisfying in my opinion, that you can use to introduce anyone into the hobby, into the RPG hobby. You could tell them, oh, just read, it's because the book is very thin. You could read this book and you could run an adventure for me and someone else, or just me if you're playing one on one. So that's another way to actually recruit someone as a game master, someone who has never run a game. Of course, there will be mistakes, errors, but that can be fixed, that can be corrected. And that way, that person that is not too accustomed or used to following indications, orders, commands, ruling certain things, they are going to perhaps even do a great job. And if you're always playing as a dungeon master or game master, now that will be your chance to play as a player character finally. So yes, do not rule out friends and family. Okay, my other suggestion, but what if you're looking, perhaps not exactly friends, but colleagues or acquaintances? It's a good idea to see how those people interact with others. If they get along with people, if they are flexible, imaginative, creative, they are definitely good candidates. Now, there's something that is very important. I think some people could end up ignoring it because of certain politics that try to make you tolerant, or they try to make you accept so many things that you do not like. And that's incredibly moronic. Our time in this planet is quite limited, so you should live your life with the people that you like, that you treasure, not someone that you have to tolerate, or that you have to just adjust to that person just because it's the correct thing. I would consider that incorrect, in fact. So find someone that matches your mentality, your mindset, your own beliefs, your sense of morality, of ethics. All of those things that are in common between you and that person are going to serve to smooth any problems that may arise during the adventure or the campaign. So if you're looking for acquaintances, people that you know, some people that you could consider friends but not close friends, just take a look at that, be mindful or observant, and think if you actually match at a certain level, mentally and perhaps also emotionally, with a certain degree of maturity. So, like I said, do not focus like in that tendency that, oh, you're going to go to this convention, and you're going to go to this hobby shop and you're going to find someone that likes to play role-playing games. You can play role-playing games automatically. No, that is not so. Just the same reason why so many people that have many differences and ideologies and all of that, they could know how to play chess or checkers or any sort of game, but that doesn't mean that they will enjoy spending time together. I can think of so many people that, yes, I simply would not like or tolerate playing some game with them. So it's better to find those people that you actually enjoy spending time with. And like I said, they have to match certain criteria, as I mentioned a few minutes ago. Now you could be thinking, but if you are looking for acquaintances or people that you know that may be interested in role-playing games, how you identify psychopaths and sociopaths? That's very tricky, but it's possible. Well, I also want to point out that I am talking about getting a game, just running a game in a physical situation, not playing online. Playing online has its own complexities. I actually do not enjoy it. I tried it several years back. I think sometimes you waste too much time trying to find the right group. And because there isn't the same degree of commitment, because you're playing with strangers, a lot of those situations will be negative. I did experience some pretty awesome adventures and campaigns, but they were few in comparison to other botched attempts. So for me, it's all about finding people outside of the virtual environment. Okay, back to sociopaths and psychopaths. They are very difficult to identify for most people because of the following. You probably know the concept that psychopaths, sociopaths, etc., they are very skilled actors. They are quite charming and charismatic. And why is that? Because the psychopaths and sociopaths and someone with narcissistic problems, narcissistic, what is the name? Narcissistic personality disorder, yes. They, those that are, let's say, made it to the teenage years and to adult age, that's because they became aware that they are very twisted from when compared to other people. They are messed up, they are ruined. Some of them perhaps could have a way to fix themselves. It's not always possible. I would say that in the majority of cases it's not possible. But others, they simply, there's no way to fix them. So they learn from a very young age, relatively young age, that they need to pretend to be normal. Many of their pleasures have to do with harming someone or treating people like objects or tools. So sociopaths, psychopaths, they are always trying to find a way to disguise themselves, and they've had lots of practice throughout their lives. So that's when you find a psychopath or sociopath that is an adult or a teenager. They have great mastery when it comes to acting and presenting a face, a mask that is not what they truly are. But there is actually a way to spot them. You must find contradictions. Someone who constantly contradicts himself or herself, not only in the way of speaking, it's a good thing if you decide to learn body language, because sometimes the way that they express themselves doesn't match their words, their thoughts, and you have to identify when they are pretending or when there is a contradiction. What they are saying doesn't match their expression, or perhaps some strange mannerism or some tic. This has to be constant. Perhaps there are some mistakes, right? There could be some people that sometimes they just do some involuntary movements while they are speaking, and you could be thinking, oh, that's a clear sign that they are psychotic because I read this book or I saw this video where they said that if someone does this when they are talking, then they are psychotic. But if they are constantly doing that, then they are probably players or game masters that you don't want in your adventures or campaigns. For example, those people that try to be humble, but they're constantly like looking down upon you, like, yes, or speaking in a passive aggressive way that expresses condescension, like you are inferior or something like that. You can identify those things. I'm going to share a couple of experiences. One I had when I was a teenager, the other one was when I just started going to college. Let's go to the more recent one in college. I was looking for people to play Dungeons and Dragons 3rd edition, and I was talking with this girl in college, and then this other guy came along. I'm also going to give you a very important information in a few moments, but okay, bear with me. This is related to what I am going to tell you in a few moments. The first time I saw him, my gut instinct. Well, let's talk about that immediately because it really applies to that situation. Your gut instinct, your intuition. Gut, intuition. Yes, those sort of je ne sais quoi, that sort of unexplainable way of sensing people. The first time I saw that guy, there was something I didn't like about him. But I was open to, I hadn't gotten out that foolishness of that you should tolerate people and try to come to an understanding. No, there are some people that your body, your whole being immediately tells you that that person is trouble. So I saw this guy, he kind of looked like the stereotype of a chaos sorcerer, so to speak. He was somewhat skinny. He had this really grotesque long nose and long ears, and he had this like gaunt look to him. He almost looked. I had every time I have encountered in my life someone that kind of looks like a vulture. No, I don't. I don't like them, and I'm usually. In fact, I cannot think of a single instance when that person was actually a good person. So, like I said, imagine like this sort of chaos vulture sorcerer, like a worshipper of Sinch, and he was like I said, like a vulture guy. So he looked at me and he said, "Haven't I seen you before?" And I thought, "No, where? Ah, yes, I think it was in a convention or something." But I didn't go to any conventions. Recently, there have been like 3 years that I didn't go to any sort of convention or hobby store at that time. And so I was thinking, well, maybe he's mistaking me with someone else. And I said, well, maybe, who knows? And he said, "Oh yeah, well, I heard you that talking that you like Dungeons and Dragons, and we're actually going to build this group." And it was a complete mess. He was the dungeon master. When it comes to issues of railroad, controlling people, when he messed up something in the adventure, retconning the entire thing. He was also in this, which is somewhat funny considering his constitution. He was in a fight club, but it was full contact. But I immediately noticed that they actually caused themselves long-term damage to organs. I'm pretty sure that in some occasions they really messed up some organs because of the way that they fought. So I managed to find a way to get out from that group pretty quick. I came up with an excuse like, "Oh yes, thank you. I was really looking forward to keep on playing with you guys, but I actually wanted to start my own group. I simply do not enjoy playing as a player character as much." So I came up with some, typical excuses, and he was like, "Oh yeah, okay." I also noticed that he was a problem guy because I saw him in two separate occasions pulling people into his game, and he always used the same, "Haven't I seen you before in a game convention?" So he's kind of like, that's another sign of a certain psychosis or a sociopathic behavior. When you treat everyone the same, in the sense that you have like this, like a pickup line. Imagine like those players that is a player as in someone who is looking constantly to get laid, that they're always using the same pickup line with every woman that they encounter, or every guy, of course. And so that person treats other people as objects for some sort of pleasure. So in the case of this guy, it was obviously that he was just looking for people to serve as some sort of artificial intelligence for his games, but he wasn't interested in playing with actual people. He was interested in using others as pawns for his game, to put it dramatically. Now, when it comes to another experience that I had as a teenager, there were these guys that were, well, they also had issues of control. I think that's a pretty big red flag. If you see that someone is interacting with others and he always wants to enforce some very flawed views, his own twisted points of views, without getting into a certain understanding or in a civil or diplomatic way of putting things, they're always going to try to control others, even if they are not game masters, because that's usually a negative trait or a vice related to some problem game masters. In this case, these players, they want to take complete control of the game, and they want to twist everything into their sick little fantasies. Like I mentioned in my other video of the player that wanted to railroad and create an entire fantasy out of the game without taking into consideration what other people wanted for the game. So it's very important to spot those things right away outside of the game environment. If you are thinking of getting someone into your game as a player, or if you are looking for a game master, you need to pay attention to how they interact with other people. Are they manipulative? Are they, like I said, do they have some sort of narcissistic tendencies or sociopathic tendencies, etc.? But you really need to develop that gut, that instinct, that intuition. Those of you that have been in very dangerous situations, perhaps some of you can have actually been in gunfights, you know that oftentimes your life is saved because there was something that was not measurable in any material way, not through your senses, not through logic or reasoning. There was something that told you, move out of the way, move out of the way, get out of there right now, change your position. Something, some action that you carry out just because you got that feeling, and you do it and you save your life. Usually, those people that want you to ignore your intuition, your instinct, etc., your hunches, are those people that are very bad people, that are psychopaths, sociopaths, etc., and they want you to stop using that sense, use the force look, so to speak. They want you to stop using those other senses, if we were to put it like that, because they are afraid that you're going to catch them in their evil acts. So you definitely need to develop that, call it whatever you like, that sixth sense, your intuition, your gut feeling, when you see someone and you don't like that person, but you really need to make sure that it comes from somewhere deep within you. For example, in college, there was this woman, she was the girlfriend of a friend, but every time we met, she was always very hostile to me. And I actually I didn't give her any reason for that hostility. Actually, that friend, that is her boyfriend, was part of another very interesting story. Maybe I will tell you some other time. It's not that important, but it could be somewhat funny when it comes to stereotypes and so some happenings that occurred when I had that interaction with them. But okay, back to this girl. She was always very hostile to me and I didn't know why. During some projects in college, we had to interact with each other. And after a few days had passed, suddenly she told me, I thought you were a completely different person. I saw you, the way that you talked, the way that you dressed, the way that you acted, and I thought that you were this. She actually thought that I was some sort of normie. That is your stereotype of perhaps part preppy, part jock. I don't know how she got to that conclusion. I think she had some racial bias because of my appearance. But she said, but you're actually like a total geek, a total dork. And I'm like, yeah, well, I'm not sure if I'm a dork, but I like role-playing games and manga and anime and all of that. So we actually ended up getting along. She actually tried hitting on me a bit, but I wasn't into her like that. She was more like an acquaintance, but there was never that deeper connection. So, like I said, when you judge someone, and you should be allowed to judge others, don't fall into that political crap. You should make your own mind about people, but make sure that even though you apply logic and some things based on your physical senses, you should also be mindful of that thing within us that tells us about dangers, hidden dangers that are not easy to perceive through the senses or a more materialistic perspective alone. I have mentioned this in other videos, but remember that the hair serves as antennae to detect those things. You should look in, do your own research, perhaps I don't know if it's in Odyssey, but I did find it in Google a few times when I searched for it. Look for the relation of hair and perception in Vietnam. They actually carried out experiments. They don't want you to know this, but look for it online and you will find some very interesting information. Scientists in the United States, they noticed that the soldiers that have less hair it was more difficult for them to spot enemies based on some sort of sixth sense or an intuition or an instinct. And they actually sent some soldiers to Vietnam with really long hair, and they were amazing when it comes to combat capabilities. Now you could be thinking, wait, but in the armies, almost all of the armies in the world, they have really short hair. Most of them are also encouraged to go completely bald. So why is that? That's because when you have long hair, it's also easier for you to break away from mental control, suggestions, political ideas. So they actually thought the United States thought that it wasn't worth it to keep soldiers with long hair, with the longest hair possible, because they were going to start to question their orders. So yes, I definitely recommend that you do everything in your power to let your hair grow as much as you can, and you will see that you will use it as antennae to perceive different things. Definitely don't take my word for it. Look for information on Vietnam, long hair, look for things like long hair powers or intuition or long hair Vietnam and things like that. You're going to find some very interesting details. So I think that's about it when it comes to some tips and advice on how to identify problem players or problem game masters before actually playing with them. It's really more of an art form. You need to develop, like I said, a hunch or an instinct. Despite all of the logic behind it, it really helps that sometimes you just sense that someone is bad news. Thank you for watching this video. If you have any comments or questions, especially your own thoughts and opinions and advice on how to avoid these problem players or game masters before getting them to the table, please let us know in the comment section below. And thank you so much to those of you that have been supporting the channel by sending drive-thru RPG gift certificates. If anyone else wants to further support the channel, the information on how to do that will be in the description below. Once again, thank you and see you later.